The rhythmic clack-clack of the train wheels was hypnotic, but it did nothing to soothe my anxiety. Outside the dirty window, the landscape hadn't changed for hours. An endless, suffocating ocean of gray pine trees. This was Siberia. Real, deep Siberia, where the map apps on your phone just show a blank grid. "Quit worrying, Alex," Max said, pouring boiling water into his cup of instant noodles. He pointed at the paper map spread out on the small table between us. "Look, the train stops here at the depot. From there, it's a 10-mile hike to Zalesye, a tiny village. We rest there, then at dawn, we hit the Dead Peak." The Dead Peak. It wasn't the official name, of course. On Soviet maps, it was just height 1402. But in the niche hiking forums Max was obsessed with, it was a legend. They said compasses spun wild there, and people felt a strange magnetic pull. We were adrenaline junkies tired of tourist traps. We wanted something raw. I looked at Max. He was grinning, scratching the intricate biomechanical tattoo that covered the right side of his neck. "Heavy packs, bad weather, no cell service," I muttered, checking my phone for the 100th time. "No service," blinked back at me. "If something happens out there—" "That's the point, man," Max laughed. "Total detox. Just us in the wild." The train screeched to a halt. It sounded like a dying beast. We were the only ones getting off. The platform was just a slab of cracked concrete in the middle of nowhere. As the train pulled away, disappearing into the mist, the silence hit us. It was heavy, damp, and smelled of wet earth and rotting pine needles. "Welcome to the middle of nowhere." Max adjusted his massive backpack. "Let's go. The village should be that way." We stepped off the concrete onto a muddy dirt road that wound into the black forest. The trees stood like silent sentinels, watching us. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just walked into a cage, and the door had clicked shut behind us. The hike was brutal. The road was a slurry of clay and icy puddles. By the time the forest opened up to reveal the valley, the sun was already setting, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and black. Zalesye looked less like a village and more like a graveyard of houses. Most of the wooden cabins were black with rot. Their roofs collapsed like broken spines. But there was smoke rising from a few chimneys. People lived here. "Creepy," Max whispered. "Looks like time stopped here in the 1950s. We walked down the main street. It was dead silent. No dogs barking, no machinery. Just the wind whistling through gaps in the fences. We saw a man chopping wood near a shed. Max put on his best friendly tourist smile. "Hey, excuse me, we're looking for a place to sleep." The man froze. He turned slowly. His face was gaunt, his eyes wide and watery. He looked at us not with curiosity, but with sheer terror. He dropped his axe and practically ran into his house, slamming the heavy wooden door. We heard the distinct sound of a deadbolt sliding home. "Friendly," I muttered. We tried 2 more houses. Same result. Curtains twitched, faces appeared in windows, pale, frightened faces, and then vanished. It felt like we were carrying a plague. They weren't just rude, they were scared of us, or maybe scared for us. We reached the edge of the village. The forest loomed ahead, dark and impenetrable. We're gonna have to pitch the tent in the mud, I groaned, shivering. Ideally, we wanted a warm roof before the mountain ascent. Wait, Max pointed. Look at that one. Separated from the rest of the decaying village stood a large, sturdy house. It had a fresh coat of blue paint on the shutters and a well-kept fence. Warm, yellow light spilled from the windows. It looked inviting, too inviting. As we approached the gate, the front door opened. An old woman stepped out. She was tiny, wrapped in a thick wool shawl, looking like a classic fairy tale babushka. Unlike the others, she didn't run. She smiled. "Travelers." Her voice was raspy but warm. "You look frozen to the bone. Are you lost?" "We're hikers," Max said, relieved. "We can pay for a night's stay. We just need a warm corner." The old woman's eyes darted over us, lingering on our heavy backpacks. Then she smiled wider, revealing strong yellow teeth. "Of course, my dears, I have plenty of room. I have a hot banya, a sauna, already heating up. And dinner is on the stove. Come in, come in." She opened the gate. We walked in, grateful for the warmth. To the right of the house stood a massive, long barn. It was huge, far too big for a single old woman. From inside, I heard a low rhythmic thumping and the heavy breathing of many, many animals. "My livestock," the woman said, noticing my glance. "I raise pigs. Come now, let's get you fed." As the gate latched behind us, I felt a strange chill, but the smell of roasting meat wafting from the house made me forget it instantly. We were safe. The inside of the house was like a museum of a bygone era. Thick, hand-woven rugs covered the floor, muffling our footsteps. On the walls, more rugs hung like tapestries, absorbing the sound. In the red corner, the sacred spot in every old Russian home, dark, wooden icons of saints stared down at us. Their faces were blackened by centuries of candle smoke, their eyes seemingly following our every move. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of dried herbs, wormwood and thyme, and the rich, fatty aroma of roasted meat. "Sit, sit, my dears." The old woman, who told us to call her Baba Nura, bustled around the massive brick stove. She moved with unsettling speed for her age. The table groaned under the weight of the food. There were pickled mushrooms glistening with oil, dark rye bread, boiled potatoes steaming in a clay pot. But the centerpiece was a massive iron skillet filled with stewed meat in a thick, dark sauce. "Eat," she commanded gently, placing the skillet in front of us. "You need strength for the mountain." Max didn't need telling twice. He shoveled the food into his mouth, moaning with pleasure. "Oh my God," he mumbled, grease running down his chin. "This is incredible. What is this? Pork?" "Home-raised." Baba Nura smiled. She didn't eat. She sat opposite us, her chin resting on a bony fist, watching. Her eyes were black beads, unblinking. My piggies eat only the best. Fresh grass, clean water, special herbs. I took a bite. The meat was tender, falling apart on my tongue. It was delicious, yes, but it had a strange, lingering sweetness to it, a flavor I couldn't place. It felt wrong, but I was starving. Then came the bottle, no label, just dark amber liquid in dusty glass. "Medicinal," she winked. "Samogon, moonshine, made with berries from the deep taiga." She poured us full glasses. Max downed his in one gulp. I sipped mine. It burned like fire, but left a numbing, herbal aftertaste. Almost immediately, the room started to swim. My limbs felt heavy, detached, as if I were sinking into a warm swamp. "You have interesting skin," the old woman said suddenly. She was looking at Max's neck, where his tattoo peeked out from his collar. "Good canvas. Strong." Max laughed drunkenly. "Yeah, custom design." I tried to focus on her face, but the candlelight made shadows dance in her wrinkles. She looked like one of those dark icons come to life. And she was still watching, just watching us chew. "To the banya now," Baba Nura announced. "You must wash off the road dust. It is bad luck to sleep dirty." She led us out the back door. The cold Siberian night hit me like a slap, momentarily clearing the fog of the moonshine. The steam bathhouse stood at the edge of the property, a small log cabin billowing white smoke. But to get there, we had to pass the barn. The massive structure loomed in the darkness, twice the size of the house itself. The sounds were louder now. It wasn't just the snuffling of animals. The wooden walls vibrated with heavy thuds. Thump, thump, like large bodies throwing themselves against the timber. And the noises. "Max," I grabbed his shoulder, "listen." From deep inside the barn, beneath the layers of grunts and squeals, came a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. It was a high-pitched, desperate wail. It sounded like a pig, yes, but it also sounded terrifyingly like a sobbing child. "They are restless." Baba Nura's voice came from the shadows behind us. I hadn't heard her approach. "They smell strangers. New blood makes them excited." "Just pigs, Alex," Max slurred, stumbling toward the sauna. "Relax, you're paranoid." We entered the banya. It was infernally hot. The smell of burning birchwood and wet stone was overpowering. We stripped and sat in the steam, sweating out the alcohol. But the feeling of dread wouldn't leave me. Through the small, foggy window of the sauna, I watched the yard. I saw the old woman walking toward the barn. She carried a bucket of slop. She unlatched the heavy iron bar on the barn door. For a split second, as the door creaked open, the noise from inside erupted into a cacophony of shrieks. And the smell, a wave of rot and old blood, wafted even to where I sat. Then she slipped inside and slammed the door. Silence returned, save for the muffled, rhythmic chewing. "We need to leave early," I told Max, who was lying on the bench, half asleep. "First light, we get out of here." Sure, he mumbled. "Best sleep of my life." We stumbled back to the house, wrapped in towels. Baba Nura showed us to a room with 2 high beds buried under mounds of pillows. I collapsed onto the mattress. The down pillows were soft, suffocatingly so. I heard the door click, then the heavy, distinct sound of a metal bolt sliding into place from the outside. I wanted to get up. I wanted to check the door. But the moonshine, the heat, and the heavy meal acted like an anchor. Darkness pulled me under before I could even lift my head. I woke up gasping. My throat felt like I had swallowed a handful of dry sand. The room was pitch black, the heavy curtains blocking out any moonlight. The silence of the Siberian taiga pressed against the walls, heavy and absolute. I reached for my phone. The screen blinded me for a second. 03:17 a.m. Still no signal. I needed water badly. "Max!" I rasped, sitting up. My head was spinning, a hangover from that strange herbal moonshine, but multiplied by 10. "Max, wake up!" From the other bed, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a snore. It was a wet, guttural snort, like something choking on its own fluids. I turned on my phone flashlight and aimed it at him. Max was lying on his stomach, the sheets twisted around his legs. He was soaked in sweat, shivering violently. "Max?" I reached out to shake his shoulder. I pulled my hand back instinctively. His skin was burning hot, radiating heat like an oven. But that wasn't what scared me. It was the texture. Max's skin, usually smooth, felt rough, coarse, like sandpaper. Under the harsh LED light of my phone, I looked closer. Thick, pale bristles were pushing through his pores on his back and shoulders. His skin had taken on a sickly, pinkish hue. He turned his head in his sleep, burying his face deeper into the pillow. A low, vibrating sound escaped him. It sounded less human and more animalistic. Panic, cold and sharp, finally cut through my drugged haze. I scrambled out of bed and rushed to the door. I grabbed the iron handle and pulled. Nothing. I shoved it with my shoulder, solid as a rock. The click I had heard before falling asleep hadn't been a dream. We were locked in. Trapped. The word bounced around my skull. I ran to the window and tore back the heavy, dust-laden curtains. The glass was old and warped, distorting the view outside. I tried to open the latch, but it was nailed shut. And beyond the glass, thick iron bars painted the same cheerful blue as the shutters. This wasn't a guest room, it was a cell. Through the glass, I looked down into the yard. A single yellow bulb illuminated the porch. The back door opened and Baba Nura stepped out. It was 3 a.m., yet she was wide awake. She was pushing a rusty wheelbarrow toward the barn. She wasn't walking like a frail old lady anymore. Her stride was strong, purposeful. In the wheelbarrow, I saw a pile of something dark and wet. It looked like muddy clothes. And a boot? A hiking boot. Specifically, a brand new Loa trekking boot. I looked down at my feet. I was barefoot. Our boots had been left in the hallway. She disappeared into the barn. The squealing inside intensified for a moment. A chorus of hungry screams, then went silent as the door slammed. I backed away from the window, heart hammering against my ribs. I needed a weapon, anything. I started tearing the room apart. No heavy objects, no loose planks, just the beds and a massive ancient wooden chest in the corner, black with age. I threw the lid open, hoping for tools. The beam of my flashlight revealed the contents, and my knees gave out. It wasn't linen. It was a graveyard of belongings. Dozens of cameras, Canons, GoPros, iPhones with cracked screens, a tangle of wristwatches, expensive G-Shocks, delicate women's bracelets, old mechanical pieces. They were ticking out of sync, a chaotic rhythm of stolen time. Passports. I picked one up with trembling fingers. A German guy, 24. Another from Moscow. A girl from Ohio, USA. They were all young, all smiling in their photos, all hikers who came to the wild Russian north for adventure. And at the bottom, a simple school notebook. I opened it. It was a ledger. August 12th. One male, 85 kilos. Meat is tough. September 4th. Two females. Young. Good fat content. Salami is curing. I gagged, covering my mouth to stifle a scream. The stew. The sweet, tender meat we had devoured just hours ago. We hadn't just eaten dinner. We had eaten the previous guests. I looked over at Max. He let out another loud, squealing snort. The tattoo on his neck, the biomechanical ink he was so proud of, seemed to be stretching, distorting as his neck thickened. We weren't guests, we were livestock. The sound of a key turning in the lock was louder than a gunshot in the silence of the room. Click, clack. I barely had time to shove the notebook under my mattress and feign sleep before the door creaked open. Through my eyelashes, I watched a slice of yellow light cut across the floor. Baba Nura stood there. She held an old kerosene lamp, the flame dancing in the draft, casting long, twisting shadows against the log walls. She didn't look at me. Her focus was entirely on Max. "It is time, little one," she whispered. Her voice had changed. Gone was the raspy warmth of the grandmother. Now it sounded like dry leaves scraping over stone. "The fever is breaking. The true form is coming." She walked to his bed. Max began to thrash violently under the blankets, and then he screamed. It started as a human scream of agony, but halfway through it broke. It snapped into a high-pitched, piercing squeal. I couldn't pretend anymore. "Get away from him!" I yelled, jumping up. I grabbed the heavy ceramic pitcher from the nightstand, ready to smash it over her head. Baba Nura turned to me slowly. In the flickering light of the lamp, her eyes didn't have whites. They were entirely black, like pools of oil. She smiled, and her mouth seemed too wide, filled with too many teeth. "He is curing," she said calmly. "The city rot is leaving him." I looked at Max, and the pitcher slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the floor. The transformation was happening right in front of me. Max's clothes were ripping as his body expanded, his ribcage barrel-chested. His face, oh God, his face. It was melting. His nose pushed inward and upward, flattening into a pink, wet disc. His jaw extended with a sickening crack of bone. "Max!" I screamed his name, but the creature on the bed didn't answer. It looked at me with terrified blue human eyes set in a monstrous, bristly face. He tried to reach out to me, but his fingers were fusing together. The fingernails turned black, thickened, and became hard hooves. He wasn't Max anymore. He was a hog, a massive, terrified animal. The only thing left of my friend was the ink on his thick, folded neck. The biomechanical tattoo, now stretched and distorted, looked like a brand, a barcode on a product. I backed away until my spine hit the cold wooden wall. My mind was fracturing. This wasn't possible. This was science fiction. This was madness. "What are you?" I whispered. "A witch?" The old woman straightened up. As she did, the shadow behind her grew. It climbed the walls, stretching up to the ceiling. The shadow didn't look like an old woman. It looked like something ancient, with branching antlers and long clawed fingers. "A witch?" She chuckled, the sound echoing as if coming from the bottom of a well. "You tourists, always needing labels. I am the hostess, the keeper. You come to my forest seeking nature, seeking to conquer the wild. Well, the wild has conquered you." She took a step toward me. "You city people, you only know how to consume. You eat, you buy, you take. So I make you what you really are inside. Pigs. Mindless, hungry pigs." She gestured to the creature on the bed. The Max thing slid off the mattress, its hooves clattering loudly on the wooden floor. It was trembling, cowering in the corner, letting out pathetic, high-pitched whimpers. "He will be happy here," she said. "Warm, fed, until the harvest." "Let us go!" I shouted, though I knew it was useless. "I'll give you money. I won't tell anyone." "Money?" She spat on the floor. "Paper. Useless. I need life. I need energy to keep this winter away." She reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a handful of gray, shimmering dust. "You, though, you are too skinny. Too much anxiety. You need to work. You need to fatten up." Before I could hold my breath, she blew the dust into my face. It smelled of grave dirt and old flowers. Instantly the world tilted. The fear didn't leave, but my will to fight evaporated. My arms fell to my sides like dead weights. My mind was screaming run, but my body simply nodded. "To the barn," she commanded, not to me but to the room. The door swung wide open. Max, the pig that used to be Max, trotted obediently out into the dark, cold corridor, and I followed him. My legs moved on their own. I was a puppet, and she held the strings. We walked out into the freezing night, toward the massive, dark silhouette of the barn, the place where the other guests were waiting. Time lost all meaning. Days bled into nights, marked only by the freezing sun rising over the taiga and setting again. The gray dust she had blown into my face didn't kill me. It did something worse. It hollowed me out. I was still inside my own body, watching through my eyes like a passenger in a car whose brakes had been cut. I remembered everything. My life, the city, Max. But it all felt distant, like a movie I'd seen years ago. My will belonged to the hostess. When she said work, I worked. My job was feeding the livestock. The barn was a cathedral of misery. It smelled of wet straw, ammonia, and despair. The pigs here were strangely silent. They didn't fight for food. When I entered with the buckets of slop, a thick, sweet-smelling mash that I now knew was laced with the same herbs, dozens of pairs of eyes turned to me. Human eyes, blue, brown, green. Eyes filled with intelligence and a terrified, mute pleading. I learned to recognize them. The large boar with the torn ear in the corner pen. That was the German tourist whose passport I'd seen. The smaller, trembling sow that always hid in the straw was the girl from Ohio. But the hardest part was the pen near the door, Max. He had grown enormous. His hide was thick and bristly, but on his massive neck, stretched and distorted almost beyond recognition, the biomechanical tattoo remained, a dark ink stain on his new reality. He barely ate. He just lay there, his heavy head resting on the dirty planks. When I poured the slop into his trough, he would look up at me. His small blue eyes were wet with tears. He knew me. He remembered. "Eat, Max." My voice sounded rusty, foreign to my own ears. I was just repeating what the hostess told me to say. "You have to get fat. Winter is coming." I would take a stiff brush and scrape the mud from his flanks. He would lean into the touch, a grotesque parody of a dog wanting a scratch. It was our new ritual. Two friends in hell, one without a voice, the other without a soul. Sometimes at night, lying on a straw mattress in the tool shed, I heard him thump, thump, thump. He was banging his head against the wooden walls of his pen, a rhythmic, desperate SOS that no one would ever answer. Winter arrived in full force, burying the village in 5 feet of snow. The road was impassable for normal cars, but the guests still came. The pull of the dead peak was too strong. Once a month, always during the new moon, a black, unmarked military-style truck would plow through the drifts to the back gate. The driver, a silent man whose face was always hidden by a hood, helped me load the cargo. I knew this day was coming. Max was the biggest boar in the barn now. He was prime meat. When we opened his pen, he didn't fight. He seemed resigned. He walked heavily toward the truck ramp, his breath steaming in the frigid air. As he passed me, he stopped. He pushed his wet snout into my frozen hand one last time. I ran my thumb over the rough, tattooed skin of his neck. "Goodbye, brother," I whispered. The words felt empty. My body was already turning away to grab the next crate. The truck doors slammed shut, sealing his fate. The truck rumbled away into the white darkness, taking my best friend to a high-end restaurant or a private buyer somewhere in the city. I stood in the snow, holding an empty bucket, feeling absolutely nothing. "Don't fret, little worker," the hostess's voice crackled behind me. She looked younger. The harvest always rejuvenated her. "We have an empty pen to fill. And look, right on time." I turned toward the front gate. 3 figures were trudging through the snow. Bright North Face jackets, expensive gear, loud American voices laughing about how crazy the hike was. 2 guys and a girl taking selfies in front of the creepy abandoned village. "Hello," one of the guys shouted, waving. "Anyone home? We're freezing. We have cash." Baba Nura transformed instantly. Her back hunched, her face melted into that sweet, harmless, grandmotherly smile that made my stomach turn. "Oh, my dears travelers," she called out, opening the gate wide. "Come in out of the cold. I have a hot sauna and dinner is almost ready. My special pork stew." They piled into the yard, thanking her profusely. They didn't see the darkness in the windows of the neighboring houses. They didn't see the emptiness in my eyes. They just saw a quirky Siberian adventure. "Get inside, helper," the hostess hissed at me when they entered the house. "Bring the moonshine and the meat. Plenty of meat." I went to the kitchen. I took the heavy pot of stew, freshly made from the German tourist, I think, and walked into the warm dining room. The new guests were already sitting at the table, red-cheeked and happy. I placed the meat in front of them. I looked out the frost-covered window at the empty pen where Max had slept just an hour ago. "Enjoy your meal," I said in a monotone voice, and began to pour the dark herbal liquor into their glasses. The cycle had begun again.